This is the Change Physician, episode 133. Welcome back to the Change Physician podcast. I'm Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we're here in episode 133 to do a deep dive on episode 132, which was Dr. Cory Fawcett, who was a general surgeon, now retired, but doing all kinds of interesting things, including his website and his books and all of his real estate investing that is turned out to be supportive of his lifestyle for he and his wife. And I think two of his kids are grown now, but I think we had a really great conversation. In fact, there'll be some coming in the future, I'm sure. Don't you think, Kevin?
Oh, no, absolutely. It was a fun episode. A lot of good information, actually a lot of good information in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always like the story, and the story can be entertaining. And then there's pieces that are like, if people hone into various aspects of what Cory was talking about, I will guarantee you're going to come out better than you started with. And particularly if the earlier on this journey that you are. So an excellent episode, fun to talk about. And then I did want to kind of add on, because you were talking about retirement, like in retirement, I'm feeling like we should change the terminology and simply just say when you're financially independent.
Yes.
Because retirement is this loaded term, and people say that you're sitting and doing nothing. And yet we know from a health standpoint, sitting around and doing nothing is basically one of the worst things that you could ever do for your health, for your overall health, when I'm going to say physical and psychological, although they're both the same thing, they both affect each other. But that should never be the goal. Mm-mm. Really, the goal, and what Cory has done, is that you're financially independent, so you can choose to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Right.
And let's just, maybe we just need to get rid of, we'll talk about retirement for maybe podcast labels, so that, the search gets it or someone's seeking it, but that really shouldn't be a word, I think, in our vocabulary. When we say retirement, we really should be talking about financial independence.
Yeah. And I really love how he had the awareness, maybe because of people around him and his family, which he taps into in that conversation, but he's very intentional to create a plan in medical school and to map that out and how you would do it, and to be consistently committed to saving. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans, they spend more than they make, whether you make a little or a lot. And so you lose out on the opportunity to benefit from compounding interest, which most young people have no idea what you're talking about, because that is like the gold to harness over the years, is to get that money in early. And so I really love, there was several notes. He had tried to achieve retiring at 50, but some of the things that he talks about is how there is more than just having enough money, even if you always question that. It's also transitioning from a crazy 100-hour plus lifestyle, type A intense life, to sudden silence of nothing, where he realized maybe he needs to kind of ease into it. And I think that's something that a good takeaway there was just that realization that there are other psychological components to living a life that's financially independent. Let's forget the retirement part, but where you can choose to do what you want. And I also loved that when he talked about on these trips, even though he was doing some other things, when he schedules and commits himself to some kind of work, it limits him on the freedom to do other things he enjoys. So any thoughts?
Well, I want to go to the beginning of the episode. So I can barely read my handwriting, but there was a couple notes that I'm like, these are important things I want to talk about. And the number one, I shouldn't say the number one, the very first thing that I wrote down that I think was key from that interview was early investing. Meaning he had crafted that plan. And I think that makes a lot of sense, where you envision where you want to be, at least have that in your idea. And you talk about the plane and adjusting journey, but wherever you are in your life, you really should be at least aware of what the future is going to be. Where do you want to end up, or where do you think you want to end up, so that you can be intentional? So that's that awareness and intentionality that we talk about all the time on the Change Physician. But the other part was in making sure that you're maximizing that time in market. So he's like, I started investing in an internship. my first contributions that I made were into internship. And probably the biggest regret that I have is I didn't max out my retirement funds during those time periods. In fact, I did an internship and I did my first 2 years of residency because I did a transitional year and then I did anesthesia. After my second child was born, I stopped contributing. That may or may not have been the right decision. We were paying a lot in childcare at that time. But if you are early in your physician journey, the earlier you get started and you're optimizing those retirement accounts, the more important and the more valuable those dollars are. Like that is so key. Like this idea of somehow, oh, I'm going to wait until I'm an attending before I start investing. It's just crazy, because when you're kind of looking the overall, unless you're like literally clinging on like your fingertips to surviving, and there's a couple scenarios, though most people in America, certainly if you've gone through medicine, are not in that space unless it's self-made. Paying yourself first, you with a retirement, make sure you're investing in your retirement plan. You cannot get that time back. You simply can't. So that was the first thing that just totally was like, okay, absolutely. We need to make sure this is emphasized, especially for people who are early in this journey.
Yeah. I was looking at my notes as well, and I know you're talking about the beginning of all of, the things that I'm thinking of, just like his decision making, who he chose to be in his life, his future wife.
Well, that was number 2 on my thing. That was the next thing I put was the spouse.
Yeah.
And we have talked about this on an episode about what is the number 1 most important financial decision that you ever made. And you brought this up. And it is. And I think this comes up again and again. Who you are going to be involved with is absolutely critical to your career, to your success, to who you are. And it just frustrates the living crap out of me, because we live in this mythological world where people are running around looking for the one and blah, 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 but they're not putting any work into it. Like, what makes a good relationship? What is the give and take that's required? What's the communication strategies? How do you pick someone and meet someone and incorporate them into your life that you can grow with? I think, again, you can grow with. And then also is involved with, depending on what your family situation is, this is it. That was, and I commented on it in the episode, but it was without a doubt, if I had to pick anything, one secret strategy that he had is he married the right person. And I just, I just think, and I'm look around, and I just think, again, that is something that as physicians, as humans, we don't talk about enough, because we live in this fairy tale land of Disney princesses and Disney princes, where everything just is. And if you hit the one, and that's not it. You have to put work into it. If you have trauma in your life, especially, you better look at the trauma to make sure that you don't reduplicate those things that you had in your past. So I get really passionate about that.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, what do people do when they have someone that's not working? I mean, that's like another episode. And I had been in a previous marriage where it was a financial benefit for me to get out. There was the other main reasons were the reason I left, but I will tell you, I went through a bankruptcy that almost kept me from medical school. I had to ask and plead with them or to see if I could delay for a year, because financially we were in basically all my credit cards were filled up by my enabling of bad behavior on the other person's part. So I had to go through a bankruptcy. And luckily, the medical school said, yes, we'll let you come in the next year without having to reapply. And so that put me on a path. Who knows what, I think I would have just reapplied and hopefully gotten in. But man, that choice of who I married then almost kept me from being able to be a physician. And who knows, what could have happened after that. But anyway, and I left that relationship right before I started making, private practice money. So there wasn't a huge loss. And that's one of the things he mentioned is that, when you make a decision to marry someone, if you get divorced and you split 50-50, your things. You'll have to listen to the episode to hear exactly how he quoted it. I don't want to like ruin the thunder there, but it really makes you stop and think. I think the problem is too, though, is that, you know, I don't think everyone's raised to, or they're not in a place to understand the gravity of who you choose to marry. So much of what I've done is just how I feel. You love somebody, you think they love you back. You think that the way that you are responsible in your life, that it'll be reflected back in the same way from that other person, and make wise choices and be pragmatic and practical. Well, if you're not given that skill set to understand that everyone is different than you, and that there are certain things that you need to kind of evaluate as to, are they going to be a wise choice for you, not only emotionally, but psychologically, financially, all of these things. I even if you come from a good upbringing, we don't get that skill set from school, and it may not be something that's really at front of mind by parents to instill in their children. And if you don't do it early, before they're already got an independent mind, think they don't need you, they might have to learn the hard way. I did.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add on to that, because we could do multiple episodes simply on
Yeah.
this topic. I think it's so important.
I think it's important.
But I think, like everything else, like if you're bankrupt, then you better learn about money. If you are a product of divorce, you probably should look into relationships. If the people in your life have a marriage that's a nightmare, like that's the other episode. There's the divorce, and then there's people who in families that probably should have gotten divorced. If you don't want to duplicate the relationships of your parents, then you need to do some work, because you're going to duplicate the relationship of your parents. Is pretty likely. You're going to model that behavior either consciously or not. So, but I'm going to pull back a little bit, because that could just suck up the rest of this episode. And I think it's because I have, my kids are getting of age, right? My son is going away to college, and it's like I just like that. It was always really important to me from an early age, and I'm not going to give all the details, but I just, from my own family, was making sure that whoever that you are involved with, and whoever that you then choose, meshes well with your family. Now, I'm lucky because my family's awesome. If I had a super traumatic, awful family, then I would probably want someone who didn't mesh with that, right? So they can repulse the negativity. But my family's awesome, and I want to make sure that whoever I was with meshes with my family. I've been very lucky in that regard, and I've been trying to talk to my kids about that. Is when you're looking at relationships, is making sure that it's not just it's you, it's the family. It's particularly if you trust your family, like, because people tend to see things when you're not in the lovey-dovey, lustful space, right? Anyway, so whole other episodes there. All right. So the next thing I had on my list from Dr. Cory Fawcett was, when he invested, is he did 100% stocks. Now, what I would love to have a future discussion with him about, because he's like, I'm still on 100% stocks in his retirement accounts. He lives off his real estate income personally, and I am 100% stocks as well. And I've always been 100% stocks. And I run a ton of these little calculators, the Monte Carlo things, where you put in, and it takes the stock market from 1871 and predicts it. And you put all these numbers and kind of see where your things go. And I just don't see anywhere where this bound allocation starts making sense. And I have not actually, and because I've done a lot of reading on this, when you're going through and you're seeing all the financial advisors, we can have another conversation about them. You need bonds, and you need bonds. And the argument that I keep seeing is because, well, you just don't know what you're going to do when your portfolio tanks. And so you don't want to sell at the bottom. And that's all psychology. And my thing is, well, if you know your psychology and you've already been through them, like we've been through a couple drops already, but you understand kind of what the process is, I still don't think that's a reason, because now you're just basically you're hamstringing yourself because you don't think you're going to have the financial wherewithal or the financial psychology to go through to be able to handle that drop without selling at the bottom, which is that's the problem, is the drop occurs like it did in March of 2020, and people are freaking out, and then they throw, oh, I got to sell, trying to time the market rather than recognizing they're in the long haul. So leave it in there. And those bond allocations, I was just so glad he said that, because I've always done 100% stocks. I've always been very, very regressive. I do predominantly index funds. I make sure that the fee structure is right. This doesn't take a lot of, you don't need the financial advisor to do this. People say, oh, Dr. Carr, you're an idiot. You don't have a financial background. Well, I can read. And just like people Google their health, which is not always the best thing to do, you can Google your finances, and it may not always be the best thing to do, but you should get at least a very good understanding of where things are. And it makes no sense for someone starting their investment to put a bunch of money in bonds. It makes absolutely no sense. So that was another takeaway I got from that.
Yeah. Well, that's another passionate thing you have. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to talk about it because he says he's still in it, and there's a reason to it. I think if you're a physician, and particularly if you're going towards that financial independence side, and then you're looking at alternative career streams, because the nice thing that we have is we have a profession and a degree that you can leverage the degree, that you can still earn money. You may not do physician-y things, but you can still leverage your degree and have some sort of income come in. The whole bond thing, even as you get older, to me doesn't make sense if you are not if you're confident enough in like the world, like the history of the world kind of a thing. I don't know. It's never made sense to me. I've been reading on it all because I'm like, maybe we should be shifting, and I keep saying it over and over again. I'm like, this makes freaking no sense, other than when your best advice is, we're just worried what you're going to do when the bottom comes out, is like telling me like the dentist who wanted to scrape out my fillings because he wasn't sure what was happening underneath them, and there could be something. I'm like, I have no symptoms, and you want to drill in my teeth and pull these things out and look around just because for feels? Like, that's stupid. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to say, when it comes to physicians that are really busy and they can just work on the saving and putting stuff to grow, sometimes, the real basic, just putting in stocks over the years, until you get the wherewithal and the time and create the time and restructure the way you're living to learn more about something special that you want to, invest in. It's kind of a plug and play for people at the beginning when they don't feel like they have the expertise for anything else. So it only makes sense to let that stuff grow, because then you're like, oh wow, look how much is like accrued over this time, while I haven't really thought about it.
We talked about that with Leaf, with right. Physician on Fire, and it makes sense. You don't have to complicate this stuff. You really can do a 1 stock, 2 stock index fund portfolio and just set it and forget it kind of a deal. And it's also important as well. Cory transitioned into real estate. His first 8 years of practice, he just optimizes retirement accounts. So if you're sitting and you're like, oh my God, I didn't do my real estate, I'm so behind, we're doing that kind of behavior. Well, no, as long as you have time in market, that will grow. And you don't have to get fancy with any of this stuff. And you could still be doing really, really well. Like if you choose not to do real estate and you're just really making sure that you front end your investments and get that time in market, you can do really, really well there. But then he moved into real estate, and it's just so funny because when he meant the 100%, I'm like, oh my God, I saw that infomercial. I know what infomercial you're talking about.
I have no idea which one it was.
Carlton Sheets. Oh, it used to be on the no money down thing. And obviously Carlton Sheets got more money selling courses on how to make money with no money down deals. But, right. But the key thing with this is there was success in what Cory did as compared to the people who may buy and just say, oh, this is a scam. I've tried and looked around and I didn't find one as soon as I walked out my door. He actually did the work and bought the property, and that started his real estate investment thing. Mm-hmm. The way he did that, I also thought was really brilliant, because all these little physician groups saying, oh, I got to buy, tell me where to invest. Everybody says I need to buy real estate. So I need to buy my real estate right now. I need to do this syndication right now. I need to do this offer right now. No, you don't. Get a little bit of knowledge here. And then what he was really crucial, and he said, I had very specific selection criteria. I told my realtor, this is what I wanted. I would see 2 to 3 deals per year, and 50% of those we would put an offer on. Mm-hmm. That's the Warren Buffett's philosophy. If you look at how Warren Buffett has invested for Berkshire Hathaway, he did the exact same thing. He spent 90+% of his time reading, him and Charlie Munger, and then they would do very, very limited deals when they were right. So it wasn't, I need to buy right now. What they needed to do is identify the right time to buy.
Right.
And so that's another one, because I again, in these physician groups, I often see people about rushing and thinking they have to invest in real estate right now. No, study, know what your criteria is, set your criteria out. If you need to adjust it a little bit at a time, you better have a good reason for it, but then make sure whatever you're buying fits your criteria, then rather than trying to change your criteria so you can fit that thing to buy. So I was just like brilliant. And I mean, we could do a whole, I'd love to talk to him more about that, because that is very focused, that is very selective, that is very disciplined, but that's very smart way of doing real estate.
Yeah. And you don't have to have your own money.
Yeah.
Leveraging it. It's like, it's crazy. You're like, oh, I don't have any money to invest. Well, then you learn the strategy. You learn how you can do it without it. And that's where another part of the brilliance is. It's stuff that people don't think about. They just think routine real estate, 10%, money down, got to have it, 20%, whatever. And it doesn't have to be this like traditional way of doing it.
But be careful with non-traditional. That's what I would say is
you have to be educated about it.
You have to be educated. You have to be careful with it. But the biggest takeaway for whatever you're going to do, I really think, is just being very selective.
Right.
You know, selective is probably going to be something we're going to have to add. We have awareness and intention and selectivity, because it was like, oh, yeah, that actually fits more than just money too. Being very selective in your career, selective in your spouse, selective, selective in this.
Well, it's and just an offshoot of that is OPM, other people's money. Mm-hmm. You don't have to always be your money, but many things in life too is I'm going to call it OPI, other people's ideas, or OPK, other people's knowledge. Like, you can benefit and leverage as long as you do your due diligence. But selectivity, that's part of it. It's not just you can learn a lot from other people and what they've done. If it makes sense for you, like he gave a good example, I think after our recording, about not everything is the right choice for everyone. It depends on you too.
Depends on you, and depends on how you're using it. And that actually, we weren't talking specifically about the 100% no money down kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that the right thing for everybody? Absolutely not. Could it make sense if you're a physician who has a very stable income stream? Probably better for you than someone who doesn't have a stable income stream. Again, we're not recommending any specific investment type vehicles, blah, blah, blah. But it really is sort of being very selective and being very aware and intentional in how you do these things, rather than just kind of flipping back and forth or whatever. So I love that part. Yeah,
definitely. And not getting, overly, like he said, he gets a little bit excited about doing things because he can, but it doesn't mean it's the right choice. And his wife is good to step in to remind him, you have enough money. Do you want the extra headaches? Or well, whatever.
That leads into you're like just feeding into.
I'm reading your mind.
I'm reading here because it was enough, right?
That's right.
And we talked about, well, what is enough?
Yeah.
And that's another really important concept to have is, what is enough for you? And what you were hinting on is when he was like, oh, he was doing these investment deals, and then he's like, oh, I can do another real estate thing, and his wife had to call him back and say, why? Mm-hmm. Really, why are you doing this? And I guess he could have said, I love it. It's something that fulfills me. I'm really enjoying it. And then that would be something else. But when you're like, well, I'm doing it
for more money.
No. Do I like spending the time? Could I use that time in a better place and get more out of it? Yes. Then why are you doing it? And that becomes, I think, is really easy to, to get trapped. What is enough? Mm-hmm.
It's like getting
have you thought
done.
About that at all? Like, what is enough? Like, I unsurprisingly, I think about it this all the time.
Well, like, you're definitely not everybody.
Yeah, I know. My brain's weird.
It's okay. We're allowed to be different. No, but achievements. Like, I just talked to another anesthesiologist, just decided to resign. you know, within 10 years of going into practice, of course, her husband's a physician, but why? To spend more time with their children, to, you know, it was a question mark, there enough money, even if I keep the nanny, you know, like there's all these things, like, there's just, you know, what's enough? And, you know, she mentioned just kind of going through a crisis herself, just what is it that really matters? Like, what's is this ambition to keep achieving and acquiring things, or just within the realm of your profession? Like, where do you get the most gratification and joy out of, you know?
Mm.
And so making the money work, even though you cut it almost in half. It's a
Oh,
big
then because, well, what
question.
is enough is another, you know, what do you need, right? Do you need to buy a brand new handbag or shoes or a car every year, or the brand new laptop every year? Like I knew a couple that would buy brand new laptops every year. That was what
Oh,
they did. Um,
wow.
and you know, I'm, it's really not a question of necessarily spending is, but what is the value of the money that, you know, what is not just the monetary value, but what is the actual inherent value in it? Like if you're, yeah, I don't know. I know someone who will be watching this and they go and buy coffee every day. Like I would never go buy coffee every day,
Right.
but they are aware of it. They know that it doesn't make financial sense, but in their entire life, it makes a lot of sense. And so that money is now intentionally spent with an awareness there that you're not throwing it away, right? On the other hand, though, if you were somebody who really couldn't afford to go buy coffee every day, maybe you were in a different stage, then you need to start looking at your priorities. Is that because people, oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, really? You have to do that. Someone has a gun to your head and is saying, if you don't do this, you're going to die. Well, no. Well, then it's a choice, and making sure you recognize that choice. There was another one, kind of like your friend. Um, someone was like, oh, I'm burned out. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, blah, 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 blah. And then, all these people are trying to say, hey, well, here's some suggestions. We're trying to help you out. And this person, well, I can't do that. I can't move. We can't have a smaller house. Oh, I can't not have my kids in private school. Oh, I can't, whatever. And it's like, those are all self-imposed. Those are all self-imposed changed on you. And until you can actually see them and you can see the fact that those are things that you're grasping and it's not somebody with hooks in you, you just, you're
The
just in this
victim.
trapped lifestyle. You're a total victim, a total absolute victim. So, understanding what enough is, and then making sure that you have that awareness of what actually is important. Because that was the last thing that really Cory was talking about, is traveling and how he would just pop into these things. And I would definitely struggle with that because I don't have, I guess we'll talk, maybe it's the confidence or just the ability to change. Is funny, we're on the change resistant podcast, and sometimes I struggle with immediate change. Like I'm not a spur of the moment guy. And just, when he was talking about walking with his hiking sticks through Amsterdam and then stopping to watch Madame Butterfly with all the people in their ball gowns, I'd probably have a really hard time doing that. And that's something I would need. I know I need to work on, is this ability to be flexible. So we want to be aware, we want to be intentional, we want to have a path, but also being able to be flexible for the right reasons.
Right.
Recognizing ultimately I can have this awesome experience sitting in my hiking gear with a really awesome story, or I could go back to the hotel room and be sad I didn't go see Madame Butterfly because I was as concerned of what the Dutch glitterati were going to think about me and my hiking poles. They probably, that's a great story for them too.
I would have loved to, like, your first cognitive thought is the idea of that, okay, we don't look appropriately dressed. But then the other part of you is like, as my husband knows, I always say I'd love to go on an adventure with him because that keeps things fun. But I'm sure there'll be an episode around this time that'll have to do with novelty. But I loved the fact that and this is one of the last things I had written down, is that how traveling and just getting away and not being surrounded by all the things that you acquire and just going on it like a backpack trip for a month, in another country, allows you to realize what's really important. And it's about the people in your life, enjoying the moments and adventures and novelties. And you really don't need that many clothes or things in your life. Besides, they become a burden when you die and everyone else has to take care of them. I mean, it just made him realize what's really important. And I think that's the beauty of freeing up your time to do other things like travel. And I expand your mind so much, but the fact that it allows him to be financially independent to create these opportunities and adventures, I think that's the ultimate like lesson that, you know, we're meant to enjoy this life. At least that's my belief. But I think we've gotten into this trenches of working all the time and we don't know what else to do with ourselves. And we feel trapped by this whole golden handcuffs and the way we're living and spending. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before maybe you take us out?
No last thoughts other than we have to have him back on. Again, I think I say this all the time, but that was there's a lot of good takeaways in that particular episode. I mean, yes, we have a lot of great takeaways in all of our episodes, folks. But a lot of really, really important takeaways, and particularly from a physician, anywhere on your career path, I think that would be a good one to listen to. Other than that, folks, you know, if you're interested in doing this journey with us, you can always go to thechangephysician.com, sign up for the community there, whether you're a physician or a physician ally. Obviously, we'd appreciate any feedback that you have. If you love what's happening, leave us a review on iTunes or whatever network you're watching us on. If we're missing something and you're not too happy, let us know so that we can address that and maybe improve things for what you want to hear and the topics that you want to hear and the people that you want us to talk to. We'd love to get your feedback there. And always, until next time, stay well.
Take care.